In the States, we have standardized tests called the SAT and the ACT. Most high school juniors take them at around the time they're applying for colleges. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the SAT specifically. Test scores are a huge deal. A majority of colleges require them when applying, and a low score is bad news. The SAT is thought to illustrate generally how smart a student is and specifically how well they're going to do during their first year of college. Except, maybe it doesn't. Intelligence can be considered many things, and much of it incredibly difficult to quantify. Studies have shown that there are more accurate predictors of success besides SAT scores, and those scores seem to correlate just as much, if not more, with things other than smarts. Like, my SAT score was awful, but now my alma mater invites me back to give advice to graduating seniors because I have a YouTube show. What's up now? Mediocre prediction of success. So, if the SAT isn't just measuring intelligence, what else is it measuring? To answer this, we gotta do history. The SAT became a test for students in 1926, but it was based on an IQ test given to the Army. The Army test was used to determine who was fit to rise in the ranks, who had the necessary mental machinery to become an officer. But it was also a test of the test itself. Would people take it? Would it work? What would the results be? And wouldn't you know it, its results, according to Nicholas Lemon's book, The Big Test, perfectly reproduced the pre-existing social order. At the time, it was popularly thought that Nordics were the most intelligent stock, Alpines next, and Mediterraneans dumbest. Said test confirmed this. In other words, the test didn't describe individuals so much as it justified attitudes towards people. He would later recant on his beliefs, but at the time, Carl Brigham, the man who wrote the test, was a passionate eugenicist, someone who believed that the future of humanity could be improved through selective breeding. Many early 20th century American academics, social reformers, and scientists supported eugenics, and they considered these tests an objective measure of a biological fact. Really, eugenics was just a pseudoscientific justification for racism and the exclusion of people considered inferior. In 1926, the Army IQ test became the SAT, slightly more difficult and aimed at, though not yet widely given, to college-aged students. That wouldn't happen for a while, but an important first step in that direction was in the 1940s, with Harvard President James Conant's dedication to the idea that education could make the country a better place. It's a newer idea than you might think. He thought anyone, which at the time was a much more restrictive word than it is now, should be able to get a serious education. And that this would establish an intellectual elite that could lead the country to greatness. And I mean, here we are back at a really weird relationship between tests and social order, but it still meant no matter how much someone didn't fit the old ideas of who should possess intelligence, if they passed the test, they passed the test. This is the ideal of the SAT and tests like it, and one of the reasons it managed to become so ubiquitous in the States. In the words of Mark Bauerlein, the chance to compete against the sons of privilege was necessary to fulfill the promise of democracy. In America, anyone can make it, and the SAT is one way to prove that no matter where you came from, you can make it. And to a certain degree, that is still true, but the more we study it, the more we realize that the SAT never fully escaped its not awesome origins. Originally, SAT stood for Scholastic Aptitude Test. It was then changed to Scholastic Assessment Test, SAT Reasoning Test, and as of 1997, those letters stand for nothing. Like KFC, AT&T, BP, and the S in Harry S. Truman, those letters front for no word. In some sense, the SAT has always been running from itself, and that's still true today. The College Board knows that they have problems and is trying to fix them.
We must confront the inequalities that now surround assessment.
A bunch of studies, links in the doobly-doo, have shown that there is a significant difference in the SAT scores of wealthy versus lower income students. Male students tend to have higher scores than female students, even though female students have higher college matriculation and graduation rates. Depending upon which study you read, either white or Asian American students tend to score better than any other race group. The reasons for this are many. Complicated to nail down at the very least. One thought is that the test, the format, language, references, the expected set of knowledge is simply more familiar, more culturally ingrained for certain people. Another factor is that wealthy families can afford test prep, tutoring, and other extracurricular academic training, sometimes collectively referred to as shadow education, even though it's not used to train their kids to be supervillains. The resources at particular schools matter, as do the accomplishments of parents and friends, test costs, and of course, time spent learning on your own. SAT results tend to align still today with common expectations of the types of people that possess intelligence. Many people who have studied the test have shown it to be just as much a test of wealth and resource as it is of knowledge and aptitude. Maybe no more than academic achievement in general, though. Just as when it started, the problem isn't the SAT alone, but the broader context in which it's written and given. Which raises an even bigger question. If it's potentially broken, why do so many colleges continue to use or require it? Well, a small but growing number don't. And for those that still do, it's about habit, the importance of selectivity ratings, which don't even get me started. But it's also about ease. Standardized tests wouldn't be popular if they weren't easy to grade. In a way, the history of standardized tests is also kind of the history of electronic computation. Ideally, there is little to no human effort required to score the sea of Scantrons scribbled upon every year, but there are limits to what computation is capable of scoring, grading, ranking, quantifying. Ideally, our metrics for success are personalized and holistic, and that would be reflected in our evaluation and assessment processes. But in reality, frequently, success and high test score are synonymous. What standardized tests measure is considered success because standardized tests can measure it. There is a weird light at the end of this testing tunnel. There is a growing SAT optional movement among colleges. There's a huge SAT overhaul coming in 2016, and some testing orgs want to test for things like creativity or collaboration in the future. But I wonder if this is educational feature creep, fixing tests with more tests, because that's how we think and live, especially in education. By the numbers. It's easy, and there are business models in place to do it the way we've been doing it. And so I wonder what's going to be the technological advancement, the change in attitude, or even educational policy that eventually encourages us to stop trying to standardize that which seemingly resists standardization. What do you guys think? Will we ever move beyond standardized testing? And if we do, what ideally would come next? Let us know in the comments. And Hansel and Gretel are to sweets as Idea Channel is to A. Records. B. T-shirts. C. Subscribers. D. All of the above. Turns out the plural of amiibo is actually amiibo, though as some people pointed out on Twitter, it could be empty wallet. Let's see what you guys had to say about collecting. First things first, next week's episode is going to be about the new Thor comic book written by Jason Aaron. We're not going to be spoiling a whole lot. We're just going to be talking about the first couple books, but if you want to be completely spoiler-free, that's a thing that you can read over the next week. It should be pretty easy to get a hold of. And also, I am going to be at the Phoenix Comic-Con at the end of May, so if you are planning on going to that, I will be there. We're going to be doing a panel, and I think we're also going to be doing office hours on that Friday night at a place called The Deuce. We don't have a specific time picked out quite yet, so keep an eye out here and also on Twitter, and I'll let you know when you can come and hang out and say hi if you live in and around the Phoenix, which I'm very excited to go back to. Okay, so Jedi Bob 5 on the subreddit and a bunch of other people saw connections between last week's episode and collectible card games like Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh! And we're gonna talk a little bit about this when we eventually get to the tweet of the week, which is related. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with this, and this is something that's definitely part of the conversation, that these are objects that have a collectability to them, but then can also be very highly consumed, and there's an economy that exists around them. And yeah, I would say that the difference is maybe comes down to how the object is used, and I think that that's one of the things that's really interesting about card games. Yeah, this is a great point. Lonerstuck talks about how gaming itself is also a kind of collecting, and this is a thing that I've been thinking about over the last week, and I think I agree, and I think that that's one of the other things that makes Amiibo so interesting, is that they allow you to create these instances of these really great and nice little objects that reference CDs or cartridges or things that aren't nice to behold. It's not nice. I don't have a great time looking at all of my old Super Nintendo cartridges. And so having an Amiibo to represent that collection or those objects in some way is a good, I don't know, stand-in? I don't know if that's the right word, but yeah, I totally agree, and I've been sort of chewing on this idea for a long time. The Moporter suggests that the missing component of this conversation is aesthetics, and that is an important part of the process of collecting. And I think that this is a really interesting question because it asks what the aesthetic experience is. Like, is the aesthetic experience a kind of consumption? When you are collecting things that you have an aesthetic experience of, are you attempting to associate yourself with the beauty that you perceive in them? Because I might argue that you can't actually have a purely aesthetic experience of a collection that you have invested time and money into. And I think that this is also related to something that Ilmari Thornton wrote about Nintendo using the amiibo to cash in, as it were, on nostalgia, which I see as another possibly aesthetic experience. So yeah, I think these are really great points and things that are very much, I see, being related to one another. Voiced mentions another interesting way to view amiibo, which is as DLC, and I think this brings up the idea again of kind of coerced consumerism through collection, and if you view it as DLC and you want the full game when a game comes out, how do amiibo relate to this desire for completionism when you're playing video games? And this is something actually that Francis, who we showed in the last video, said some interesting things about in one of his videos. And actually, on the subject of Francis, there were a couple people letting us know that we should make it clear that Francis is an ironic character that someone plays. I didn't know that there is a misunderstanding about the fact that Francis is a character and that is something we should make explicit. So for clarity's sake, I will make that explicit. Francis, the guy who was shouting very loudly in last week's video, he's not actually like that. He's a character. Turns out I might have actually been the weird kid who didn't really play with their toys the way that they were played with in the commercials, because there were a lot of people saying that they definitely play with their toys. There were some people who had the same experience that I did, but they seemed to be few and far between. So we'll put a link to the people describing their relationship to their toys when they were younger in the doobly-doo, along with every other comment. Ignoramus, let's just say you ain't seen nothing yet. Also, Ilmari, look, it's your record. This week's episode was brought to you by the hard work of these non-standard individuals. We have a Facebook and IRC and a subreddit links in the doobly-doo. And the tweet of the week comes from Quixote, who points us towards an NPR show about magic cards and how Wizards of the Coast saw collectors as hindering gameplay, and so they sought to burst the collector bubble. It's a really great listen. And hey, in case you were wondering, this episode of Idea Channel was brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is an easy way to create a website, blog, or online store for you and your ideas. Squarespace features a user-friendly interface, custom templates, and 24/7 customer support. To try Squarespace, go to squarespace.com/Idea Channel for a special offer. Squarespace, build it beautiful.